Okay, well, welcome to our second presentation of today, which is Amana, Land, Community, and Sense of Place. And this is really another program that's going to be focused a lot on the images, which is why I'm grateful for Lanny for putting up these high-tech shields to kind of cut down the light in here. Basically, what I'm going to argue here is that, of course, the Amana people have a very strong sense of place. They very much identify with the land and have taken to calling different fields by different names and being very defensive of the natural environment in which they've been located, both in Germany and then in New York State and then finally here in Amana. But the main way that they have represented that love of community, as Lanny suggested, is through maps and artwork. And so this is kind of an art show here. We're going to start out. Yes?
Grab the podium and step back about 12 inches.
How's that?
Well, grab the podium back. You're taller than what you think.
Just slightly. Yeah. So we'll get started. Through the years, I've collected pictures of artwork that show different places that the Amana people lived. That was created by Inspirationists, and also some maps. And unfortunately, some of this material is now missing or has disappeared through the years. We're fortunate that it was photographed many years ago. Starting, of course, the Amana people come from Germany, Hessen-Darmstadt, area around Biedingen. This is the thank you. This is the first shot. This is called the Vincent Reed Hof. This is the Vincent Reed family's home in Lieblos, and it actually still stands. And if I could figure out which is the pointer. Center one. Oh, thank you. So this still stands, and the Vincent Reeds were, of course, among the people who got the woolen mill started, and you can actually see skeins of dyed yarn on the drying racks outside the house. And there's a photograph taken helpfully from the same angle in about 1900 by Dr. Noy when he was over there studying, shows the same scene. And you can see one of the features that shows up in the Amana landscape a lot are, of course, the climbing grapevines and other vines on the houses, which you see in this picture. Today, this building no longer stands, but this little building over here to the left is still there. This is the Obermühle, which is where the Hahn family originated from. And this is a watercolor that was done probably many years after they had left Germany from memory. It's attributed to a man named Friedrich Jeck, and we'll talk more about him later. But this shows again the kind of environment that the people knew in Europe before coming to the United States. And now we're going to enter into a series of drawings that were done by Joseph Prestole that show the 5 estates where the Inspirationists found refuge in the 1820s and 1830s, and kind of keep these images in mind because he would later combine these into a kind of a composite sketch, which we refer to as the Wanderung, the wanderings of the Inspirationists, as sort of a pictorial history of the community. So we start out with the Ronneberg Castle here, which of course is still there. Marienborn, you can just barely, I apologize for the quality of this picture. It's the little estate down here with the hills really are shaped like that behind it. It's not just Prestole's imagination, but you can see how he's trying to cite everything in sort of a bucolic, garden-like atmosphere, and that's something that you see throughout his work. The man was, after all, a gardener before he became an artist. This is the Herrenhag, which was an estate originally built as a collection of 12 buildings by the Moravian Brethren in the 1730s. They lived there until about 1752 when they basically were asked to leave. We don't want to go into details, but they're some sexual practices and things like that. Not for a family audience. So anyway, these two buildings were the only two of the 12 remaining, well, that one and these two over here, when the Inspirationists leased the estate in 1827, and they actually would occupy these two buildings, and they're still standing there today. If you've been to Herrenhag, to the Ranneberg area, you will have seen these buildings. They are in the process of being restored right now. They've rebuilt the little well house here at the center. It's a Moravian community that lives there. This is another view of Herrenhag from, I believe, the south. And there are the two buildings of the Herrenhag, again, by Joseph Prestole, kind of with these grand wood-like hills. This is his home estate, the Engeltal. This is where Prestole and his family lived after 1837. So Joseph Prestole was born in 1796 near München, near Munich, and was trained as a botanist and as an artist, and made his living illustrating botany books, basically, in his early life, and became quite well known. He became an Inspirationist in 1836, and he and his family relocated to the Engeltal shortly thereafter. And this is a picture of Engeltal. Again, note all of the foliage and trees and everything looks so nice and well kept. And this scene is basically the way it looks today. And then Armenberg, or Arnsberg. This is originally called Arnsberg. It was a Catholic monastery, Cistercian monastery near Liège. And the Inspirationists occupied that place after 1832. And we know that they lived in this building here. And that's based on a tradition in my family. There's a photograph, and that my mom always points to it and says, your great-great-grandfather was born in the room behind that window in the corner. So this is the first woolen mill is over here. How she knows, I don't know. But her mother is getting up there in here. So, no. Over here to the left is the woolen mill. And again, that's all still standing. And when Joseph Prestole came to America, he was in the first group to come across the Atlantic and settle at Ebenezer. He wanted to commemorate the history of the Inspirationists, especially following such a, oh dear, mother's here. Yeah. Anyway, following this momentous move across the Atlantic. And so he started out by doing this quick sketch, which was found among Prestole family papers just about 2 years ago. We didn't even know this existed. And this is a wonderful hand-done watercolor that shows Engeltal here in the middle, same view as I showed you before, the little ship Florida that he sailed on to cross the Atlantic, and then some scenes of New York Harbor. And presumably in these empty frames down at the bottom, he was going to draw the Ebenezer villages, but he got kind of tired of it, and instead worked on this. And this is the same concept. So here you have those same views of the 5 estates, kind of all mushed together here at the top, with the ship in the center. And if you really zoom in on this, it does have the name Florida painted on the back, which is the ship that the Prestoles came on. And then he thought that people would like to remember some scenes of New York Harbor. So he put Fort Tompkins and the quarantine hospital, of all things, down here. And then he added the Ebenezer villages. So Over Ebenezer, Middle Ebenezer, and Nida or Lower Ebenezer. And these are all framed with grapevines and all kind of conveying this bucolic view of the colonies. And here you see those 5 views of the villages that I had shown you earlier, arranged as they are in that print. So there they are again. And when he was in Ebenezer, he did do some artwork. to kind of describe the place where he was living. He did a number of lithographs. And we know these are lithographs because there are more than a few examples of these around. Most of them are uncolored. They look like this. This is Middle Ebenezer. This is a colored version of the lithograph. This was owned by Lena Onkelink when this picture was taken. And that shows the Middle Ebenezer Saal there in the middle, and then various houses down the side. My copy of that lithograph actually has the residents of the houses identified on it. So he's portraying the villages in kind of this garden-like, very heavily landscaped way. He's showing how the Inspirationists are putting their footprint down in New York State as early as about 1850 when this picture was drawn. And then he did these views of Middle Ebenezer. And these are among the things that are missing. If anybody knows where these drawings are, please let me know. They are beautiful panoramas of Middle Ebenezer. They were loaned to Frank Lankus, who was the historian of West Seneca, New York in the 1940s by Autumn Clemens. And I don't know if they were ever returned. But Lankus had these photographs taken of them and printed them in his book. This large building here at the center is the Middle Ebenezer Woolen Mill. Up here you see the other side of Buffalo Creek. Here's Buffalo Creek. There's the bridge crossing the creek, and then various houses, including the Glockenturm there, the bell tower. Up here is a little building that had been the Indian sawmill, the Seneca sawmill, before the Ebenezer Society arrived. And that was used by them as the place for the Buddha to meet. And then he also did, or maybe there's a little controversy on this drawing, but this is Lower Ebenezer or Nita. And it actually shows suburban Lower Ebenezer, so low Ebenezer, if you will. That's a kitchen house right there, and you can see that even in Ebenezer we had the grapevines growing on the walls, we had the labat around the foundation, and so on. This is taken from a sort of grain elevator along Cazenovia Creek, and that happened to have burned down in 1850, so he can't have drawn this view after 1850. Looking north. That's the meeting house for Lower Ebenezer, and the main village is up here, kind of in the distance. Now, Friedrich Jeck made some drawings of this same scene, and we'll talk about him in a few minutes. And he sometimes, this gets attributed to him, but there are about 5 copies of this print that are virtually identical, and the Des Moines Art Center staff looked at it under a microscope and said this is a lithograph. So I'm going with that this is Prestelay's work. Sorry, you Friedrich Jeck enthusiasts here. This is a view of Schub's farm in Canada. This is definitely the work of Joseph Prestelay because this happens to be signed. The Schaup family, S-C-H-A-U-P, were Mennonites living right on the border of the Niagara River, right on the Canadian border in Canada. They joined the Inspirationists. They brought their land into the community, and it formed the basis of the village of Canada Ebenezer. You know, we were not very original at naming things. We had Lower Ebenezer, Upper Ebenezer, then we had the new village, New Ebenezer, and then Canada Ebenezer. So this actually shows the Schaup farm. There's the farmhouse. There's a bell on top of it because he had hired workers, and that would call the hired workers in. And there are a couple copies of this one, and one of the copies actually has a penciled note on the back that where one of the granddaughters who remembered the farm actually identified every single building in this picture. And then down in the lower right-hand corner is JP. So I'm pretty sure it's Joseph Prestelay. This is Prestelay's drawing of Kenneburg, which is another village in Canada, about 30 miles north of Canada Ebenezer. And we always thought these were tiny little villages, but then we were able to access the Canadian, the Ontario census for 1850 2, I believe. And there were over 120 people living in this little village. So it was bigger than East Amana, if you will. More like West Amana size. And Lanny laughs at me for this, but I always think that that might be Prestole's attempt at a self-portrait, the little figure of the man in the front with the paper in his hand. But there's the village in the distance. You can see the creek here. You can see the cleared land, how the Inspirationists are shaping that property in very quick order. Then we come to Johann Jakob Friedrich Wilhelm Neu, who was one of the Committee of Four, sent from Germany to the United States to search for a new home for the Inspirationists. And this is a picture of Wilhelm Neu, very, very handsome man, as you can see. It's my grandfather. That's his traveling trunk off to the right. And he was completely untrained as a map maker, but he compulsively drew maps all his life. He was forever drawing maps of Ebenezer in letters that he sent back to Germany. This is a spring of 1844 map where he's showing what the land looks like that they had purchased. And then over here on the right, another map that actually includes a little key. And this is from 1843, where he's actually identified different houses and mills and things like that that they've been building. And I apologize that it's so hard to see in that picture. Then he created these fabulous maps about 1850 that show the villages of Middle, Lower, and Upper Ebenezer. And these have sort of the sideways perspectives of the buildings, so you can actually see what the buildings look like and the way that the village was laid out. So here's the woolen mill. There in the exact center of the map is the Versammlungssaal, the meeting house, and then rows of houses, and then beyond that some barns. And these are really terrific maps. Unfortunately, the quality of these pictures is not that great, and sad to say, this is the only evidence we have of these maps because they went missing in the 1970s. Again, there are lots of stories about what may have happened to them, but we just don't know. Anyway, this is Oba Ebenezer, also in 1850. There's the village. It's now called Blossom, New York. And on this one, he's even provided a little key. And what's nice about these maps is, again, Frank Lankus had them in his possession in the 1940s, and he used them to create kind of a very clear plat of each of the Ebenezer villages. This is a map of the Ebenezer land that you might all be more familiar with. This is when they were selling that property. So this is not a map created by the Inspirationists, but rather by an outside firm, I believe a man by the name of Elmsley, who surveyed the villages and broke the land up into lots. And this is about 1856 when this was done. Here's Upper Ebenezer. Here's the village of New Ebenezer, Middle Ebenezer, and Lower Ebenezer over here. And this is one of the village maps. These are just wonderfully detailed maps, and there are lots of copies of these that are still floating around the Amanas. Shocker for most of you, they sent a committee to look for land in Iowa and eventually started to buy land here. And this is a map that was drawn in, oh gosh, I can't remember, I think about 1860, and it's got a couple of unusual features. This particular map is in a cardboard binder, and on the binder it says Gemälde von Bruder J. Prestole for Christian Metz. And if you can see it close up, he's actually drawn in the little houses of the pioneers who were living here at that time. So down here, you've got Whiting's farm, where Mr. Whiting lived by South Amana. That's the Indian trading house we'll talk about next week. Then up here, you've got, it's called Heaven. It's by West Amana. I guess West Amana was Heaven. Or somebody named Heaven lived there. Wolf. And then over here, Bleibtreu Amana. So this is probably one of the very last times that the name Bleibtreu is actually used to refer to the village of Amana. East Amana is there. Homestead's down here, but they haven't yet bought the land around Homestead. And Middle Amana is not on this map. So this was at a very good period in Amana history. Those were the days. But you can see, you know, so much of that land that is not yet owned, but they're already thinking in terms of basically boundaries. You know, even though they clearly own land out here, they're thinking of kind of a rectangular boundary here. And of course, the mill race isn't on this map, but you can see the Iowa River fairly accurately drawn in here and Price Creek trailing down from the north. Amana Fodahe, Amana in front of the hill from the south. This is probably one of the very earliest images of an Amana village. It was done on top of a map. I'll show you that map here in just a minute. But you can see the village laid out. You're looking at it from the south. You can already see the tannery smokestack there in the center. These are two Mom will recognize these. These are two very early drawings of houses in the Amanas. This is the Marshall Kitchen House in Main Amana, and this is called the Economy House, or the Farmhouse. That's now, used to be Lem Books. I can't remember what it's called now. I think it's called Maddie's. Margie Jane's. It's on the corner. Used to be George Reddick's house. That still stands here in Amana. The Brick Kitchen House, yes. Very good. And then Wilhelm Noy couldn't stop drawing maps. Like I said, he was a compulsive map drawer, and he drew this perspective of Homestead. And I'm going to focus on this for a very long time, because clearly this is the highlight of the presentation. This is in a private collection still, but they were very kind to let me have it photographed. And it shows the village. You're looking at it from the north, so you're looking at it from the north to the south. And they've drawn in the Mississippi and Missouri Railroad here, which is now Iowa Interstate, and for many, many years was the Rock Island. Here's the sawmill. And then in the distance, you can see Marshall's house here. You can see what's now Die Heimat there at the center. That's where Wilhelm Noy lived. And right next to it, the general store. And then way down here, you can just see the corner of what we knew as the Helgeson house, which is right next door to the hotel. And this was drawn in 1866. We know that simply based on the fact that there should be a house here, and it's not yet been built. And it was built in 1866. And up here he has thoughtfully provided a key telling you who lived in which houses. So this is really the high point of Amana map making. Then there's Friedrich Jack, or Fritz Jack, was born in the 1830s, came to Ebenezer as a child with his family, was trained as a watchmaker and as a surveyor, and of course is a man who clearly was very focused on details and very meticulous in his work. And the next series of maps I'm going to show you are maps that we think he drew, because there's a brief mention in the letters back and forth to Ebenezer when they were setting up the villages, that Brother Yek is working on the maps, just saying you, or the map. But anyway, this is, that's actually a picture of him taken about the time he died in 1906. Lanny showed these. This is about the earliest map of Main Amana. It's about 1858. And this is a detail of a little later map. Very, very neatly labeled, color-coded. There are numbers on the houses. There evidently was a key that went with this that unfortunately is lost. This is the full map here. Here's Price Creek meandering along here on the north side. Mill Race isn't in here yet. And the church where we are right now will eventually be built right where I've got the cursor now, but it's not there. Sawmill is up here in the upper left. This is the map of High Amana when there were about 8 houses in all of High Amana. There are now 9. No. No. But this is early on, and that's where that drawing comes from, of High from the south side. So you can see this is a very, very finished map. There's clearly going to some great lengths, but it's unlike the Noe maps because it's very carefully measured. The lines are straight. Everything is to scale. We actually laid this map over an aerial view of Amana, and it fits almost exactly, so it's very much to scale. West Amana, or heaven, I guess. The Steinbrück here, the stone quarry off to the side. Huge orchard. They already have the cemetery, the Gottesacker up here, even though nobody would be buried in West until 1863. And we know that this map is 1860 because it is actually the only one that's dated. This is a plat of South Amana, Plan von Seed Amana. And this, you can't see it, but it's the Mississippi and Missouri Railroad misspelled. Over here you can see kind of that Colony Deutsch mixing of English and German words. And the brickyard is over here at that time. Later it was moved up to the north side of the village. And then we get to the Middle Amana maps. And for some reason there are about half a dozen maps of Middle Amana from the early years in the museum collection. And I think this is just because Middle Amana people got lost easy. And so they needed to have a lot of maps. Now, as those of you know, they built Middle Amana very quickly, 1862 to 1865, and as Lanny described last year. And so these maps are difficult to date because so much construction has already happened so quickly. So it's hard to say, well, Reedy's wasn't built until 1864, and so this map is before that time. This is an outsider taking a view of Amana. This is drawn by a hired hand by the name of Ernst. That's all he was known as.